Mikhail Gorbachev was born on March 2, 1931, in the village of Privolnoye, Soviet Union. He grew up during a difficult time in his country's history. The Soviet Union was a large nation made up of many republics, and it was led by the Communist Party. Gorbachev's early life was shaped by the hard work of farming and the challenges of World War II, which affected millions of people. However, this story will focus on his political work and ideas, not his personal life. Mikhail Gorbachev became one of the most important leaders of the Soviet Union in the 20th century. He is best known for his efforts to change the Soviet system through policies called perestroika, restructuring, and glasnost, openness. These ideas aimed to make the Soviet Union more modern, more open to the world, and more fair for its people. Before Gorbachev, the Soviet Union had a very strict government, limited freedoms, and a struggling economy. Many people inside and outside the country hoped for change. Gorbachev joined the Communist Party when he was young and worked hard to rise through its ranks. By 1985, he became the General Secretary of the Communist Party, the most powerful position in the Soviet Union. At that time, the country faced many problems. The economy was weak, and people were unhappy with the lack of freedom. The Soviet Union was also in a long competition with the United States called the Cold War. This was not a real war with fighting, but a tense rivalry over politics, technology, and influence around the world. When Gorbachev became leader, he wanted to solve these problems. He introduced perestroika to reform the economy. The Soviet economy was controlled entirely by the government, which decided what to produce, how much to produce, and how to distribute goods. But this system was not working well. Factories were inefficient and stores often had empty shelves. Gorbachev's perestroika allowed some private businesses and gave factories more freedom to make their own decisions. He hoped this would make the economy stronger and improve life for ordinary people. Another key idea was glasnost, which means openness. Before Gorbachev, the Soviet government kept many secrets. Newspapers, television, and books were strictly controlled. People could not criticize the government or discuss problems openly. Glasnost allowed more freedom of speech and more honesty about the country's challenges. Newspapers began reporting on issues like corruption, pollution, and past mistakes by the government. This was a big change for Soviet society. Gorbachev also wanted to improve relations with other countries, especially the United States. The Cold War had created fear and mistrust between the two superpowers. Both sides spent huge amounts of money on weapons, including nuclear bombs. Gorbachev believed this was dangerous and wasteful. He met with U.S. President Ronald Reagan several times to reduce tensions. In 1987, they signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) Treaty, which banned certain types of nuclear missiles. This was a major step toward ending the Cold War. Not everyone in the Soviet Union supported Gorbachev's changes. Some Communist Party leaders thought he was moving too fast and risking the country's stability. Others, especially younger people and intellectuals, wanted even more freedom and faster reforms. Meanwhile, the economies of the Soviet republics were still struggling, and people grew impatient for better living conditions. One of the most important events during Gorbachev's leadership was the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. A nuclear power plant in Ukraine exploded, releasing dangerous radiation. At first, the Soviet government tried to hide the accident, but under glasnost, they eventually admitted the truth. This openness showed the world that Gorbachev was serious about changing the old ways of secrecy. However, the disaster also revealed the poor state of Soviet technology and management. By the late 1980s, Gorbachev's reforms led to unexpected consequences. The loosening of government control allowed people in Soviet republics like Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia to demand independence. Inside Russia, political debates became more open, and critics of the Communist Party grew louder. In 1989, Gorbachev announced that Soviet troops would not interfere in the affairs of Eastern European countries, which had been under Soviet influence since World War II. This decision led to the fall of communist governments in countries like Poland, Hungary, and East Germany. The most famous symbol of this change was the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989, which had divided East and West Berlin since 1961. In 1990, Gorbachev was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in ending the Cold War and reducing nuclear weapons. The Nobel Committee praised his efforts to create a more open world. However, back in the Soviet Union, many people were still unhappy. The economy was not improving quickly enough, and some republics wanted to leave the Soviet Union entirely. A major crisis occurred in August 1991, when a group of hardline communist leaders tried to overthrow Gorbachev. They wanted to reverse his reforms and return to strict Soviet control. Gorbachev was placed under house arrest, but the coup failed after 3 days. People in Moscow, led by Boris Yeltsin, who later became Russia's president, protested against the coup leaders. This event weakened Gorbachev's authority and strengthened the republic's desire for independence. By the end of 1991, the Soviet Union was falling apart. One by one, the republics declared independence. On December 25, 1991, Gorbachev announced his resignation as the Soviet Union's president. The next day, the Soviet Union officially dissolved, ending 69 years of communist rule. Russia and 14 other republics became independent countries. After leaving office, Gorbachev remained active in politics and global issues. He started organizations to promote democracy, environmental protection, and social justice. He also wrote books, including his memoir Perestroika, New Thinking for Our Country and the World, where he explained his ideas and experiences. Though some people in Russia blamed him for the Soviet Union's collapse, others around the world saw him as a visionary leader who helped end the Cold War peacefully. Gorbachev's legacy is complicated. His reforms brought more freedom and openness to the Soviet Union, but they also led to political and economic chaos. The end of the Soviet Union was a historic moment, marking the close of a century dominated by communism and Cold War tensions. For better or worse, Gorbachev's courage to challenge the old system changed the course of history. Throughout his life, Gorbachev emphasized the importance of peace and cooperation. He believed that countries should work together to solve global problems like poverty, climate change, and nuclear weapons. In speeches, he often quoted a Russian proverb, "Trust but verify." This meant that even if nations cooperate, they should check each other's actions to ensure fairness. Mikhail Gorbachev passed away on August 30, 2022, at the age of 91. His death marked the end of an era. World leaders remembered him as a transformative figure who dared to imagine a different future. Though his time in power was short, his impact on the world remains significant. To understand Gorbachev's story, it is important to look at the world he lived in. The Soviet Union was a superpower, but it faced deep problems. Gorbachev's perestroika and glasnost were attempts to fix these problems without destroying the system entirely. However, once people tasted freedom, they wanted more. The Soviet Union could not survive in this new atmosphere. Gorbachev's life teaches us about the power of ideas. Even a single person's vision can change the world. His efforts to create a more open society inspired millions, but they also showed how difficult it is to reform a deeply rooted system. The story of Mikhail Gorbachev is a reminder that leadership requires both hope and humility. In schools today, students learn about Gorbachev as a key figure in modern history. His policies are studied as examples of how leaders can try to change society. Though the Soviet Union no longer exists, its history and Gorbachev's role in it helps us understand the challenges of politics, freedom, and global relations. Gorbachev once said, "Life punishes those who come too late." He believed that leaders must act quickly to address problems. His own actions were driven by this sense of urgency. Whether he succeeded or failed depends on who you ask, but no one can deny that he changed the world. The fall of the Soviet Union created a new world order. Countries that were once part of the Soviet bloc joined the European Union or NATO. Russia itself became a different nation, facing new challenges and opportunities. Gorbachev's dream of a common European home, where East and West could live in peace, remains a goal for many. In conclusion, Mikhail Gorbachev was a leader who tried to bridge the gap between old and new. His ideas of perestroika and glasnost opened doors that could not be closed again. Though his time in power ended with the collapse of his country, his vision of a more peaceful and open world continues to inspire. History will remember him as a man who dared to think differently and in doing so, reshape the globe.